This is Big Podcast.
Is it possible that you're actually repelling listeners? Not only not attracting listeners, but getting them as far away from your podcast as they possibly can, actually pushing them into the arms of other podcasters, people whom you would consider your competitors. Yeah, it's possible. We're going to talk about it. It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. My name is David Hooper, and this podcast, all about growing your podcast audience, getting people to your podcast, attracting, not repelling, making a podcast that people care about, making a podcast people would miss if it were gone, and making a podcast that makes you money. BigPodcast.com is the website. This is the audio edition of my weekly newsletter. It is called Big Podcast Insider. You can find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 218. Here's what we're going to talk about: a common podcast problem and how to fix it. How to grow your podcast without social media. 550 episode ideas. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into all of them on this podcast. Banning Twitter links. Yeah, it's happening. This is what you need to know about it. A podcasting masterclass. This is free. Got more information coming up. Almost there. Almost. This episode of Build a Big Podcast is brought to you by Riverside.fm, a virtual studio that makes recording and editing at the highest quality possible accessible to anyone, even you, even your guest on the other side of the world, even your co-host on the other side of the country. Studio quality recordings, lightning fast editing. This is the full package. This lets you record. It lets you edit. It will even help you market your podcast and promote it using high quality AI tools. You're going to get instant transcriptions powered by AI with 99% accuracy. You got a lot of awkward silences, filler words. AI can take care of that with one click. And one thing that I like, live streaming and audience interaction. This is one of the things that I miss about radio, that podcasting, until recently, we haven't really gotten this right. We're getting it there, though, and Riverside can help you with it. Live streaming and audience interaction. What that means, you can broadcast your live episodes, have people connect and call in, have people in the chat room, bring your audience in, make them part of those episodes. Then you got a full-blown radio-style podcast that can go out anywhere. It's very cool. I want you to try it for free. Riverside.fm. That is the URL. If you go there right now, they're going to give you a couple of hours. All these things that I'm talking about, you can try them for free. Look under the hood. Kick the tires. Do one of those live broadcasts. See how it works for you. If you like it, you want to stick around, I've got a discount code for you. Again, get that free account, riverside.fm. That's how to do it. And this discount code, Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. That's riverside.fm. The discount code is going to get you 15% off. It's Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. We are going from thing to thing to thing, all of them about podcasting. In between each of these things, you're going to hear this sound. That is how you know. If you want more information, if you want the links to things that I'm talking about, you can go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 218. You'll find those things there. Are you ready? Here we go. A common podcast problem and how to fix it. There is a fine line when it comes to insider content on your podcast. On one hand, listeners want to feel special. They want to be part of something. And insider content can help them feel that way. You're a podcaster. I'm assuming you're a podcaster. This podcast is designed for podcasters. So when I say DAW, D-A-W, or if I talk about Audacity or Adobe Audition, things that podcasters would know, you are going to know those things. If you're listening with a non-podcasting friend, he might say, you know what he's talking about? You'd say, yes, I know what he's talking about because I'm a podcaster. And this is the marketing podcast for podcasters. On the other hand, it is very easy to make a podcast with too much about you. And this is what repels listeners. I've heard it called main character syndrome. That's a tendency where someone views themselves as the central figure in every situation. Let's talk about what that would look like with a guest. Personal stories for every situation. For example, a guest says something and you as the host respond with your experience. Every time. You got a co-host? How many times have you queued up a podcast and the very first thing is co-host catching up? Oh, I hadn't seen you since the last one. What have you been up to? Oh, man. Billy's in 5th grade now? Oh, my gosh. Time flies. Unless it's a family podcast, something about kids, who cares? A little goes a long way. You can share a little bit about yourself, but like a sentence or two. Something like, this weekend my wife actually played pickleball. It It was interesting because I thought about podcasting. Boom, go on to the story. And just saying something like that, oh, I got a wife too. They're going to feel more connected to you because of it. So that stuff's not bad. But the co-host banter and the personal stories that go on and on and on and on that are not about the topic of your podcast or situations that have anything to do with the people who are listening. No, don't do that. Overusing first-person narratives. One of the things that I see, especially if you're in the business advice type of podcast, where you're, I don't know, a social media guy, and you're teaching people how to grow social media. You're an email marketer. You're teaching people how to market via email, something of that nature. Teaching people to do something usually, but continuously talking about your experience, not other people's experience. And if you're considered a guru in that business, say you're some kind of internet marketer, you're making $100,000 a month, people might be listening to you because they aspire to be like you. But if you constantly talk about the situations that you are in as a $100,000 a month business, that's not going to work. Because listeners, again, they're aspiring to be you, but they are not there yet. And if it's one-sided, I got into this situation, then I got into this situation, and I got into this situation, that's not relatable. You're going to get much better results, have more people interested in what you're saying. If you said, I had a client in this situation, I had a friend in this situation, or better yet, a listener wrote to me and was in this situation. It could be the exact same situation, but it's about the audience. It's not just about you. Related to this, excessive self-promotion, constantly plugging personal projects, achievements, or merchandise, that becomes tiresome. Especially if you're one of those $100,000 a month guys and you're doing great, but your listeners not so much. They aspire to be like you, but they can't connect to it. And they think, oh, wait a minute. This guy's 100,000. He's got all these problems. He's whining. I wouldn't whine if I had $100,000 a month. I saw a guy. It backfired on him like this. I think he was trying to be relatable. This guy had a situation where somebody had broken into his office, stole his equipment. And that's tough, man. That is tough. But this dude went on and on about it. He was so violated. You just got the feeling he had never had any hardship in his life. And the comments were like, dude, what are you bitching about? You're making $100,000 a month, and we're talking about $5,000 worth of stuff that went missing. The people in the comments section, we're dying over here day to day trying to make this thing work, and even we could have handled this better than you are. You need to consider that. And I got it. It is a fine line. You want to be relatable, but also kind of not relatable, because people want to aspire to be you, but friendly, approachable. I talk about this a lot in the book. Big podcast. You know I got a book. Speaking of excessive self-promotion, I don't talk about it that much, but if you go to bigpodcast.com/books, there's actually more than one. And I talk a lot about this in those. This is what I've been doing a lot for years, growing audiences. And it's not just your stuff, it's also who you are. If you've got excessive self-promotion, if you've got personal stories for every situation, co-host banner that has nothing to do with listeners, again, main character syndrome stuff where it's all about me, blah, 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 blah. That's not going to connect. With some people it is. Your super fans, parasocial relationships, they are really, really into you. Or are they? Are they just bored? Need something to do. It's not going to connect to the masses. You want to be approachable, somebody people aspire to be, but also not all about yourself. It's a fine line. Ignoring listener feedback. This is something I see a lot of podcasts just getting into. Failing to incorporate or acknowledge listener suggestions and feedback that makes the audience feel undervalued. For example, my guy lost his equipment. I don't know if he's looking for empathy, sympathy, whatever. This is also another one you need to balance. Because on one hand, it's your show. You're the driver. You know the direction it needs to go in. On the other hand, sometimes we're too close to our own shows. And on the other hand, the people listening, maybe your podcast isn't for them. If you were to change your podcast every single time somebody made a comment, you would never go anywhere. You go around in a big circle. You would change it, change it, change it, change it, change it. Sooner or later, 360 degrees comes around, you're back where you started. So that's not necessarily a good situation. Let me summarize this for you. Even if your celebrity listeners want content that resonates with their interests, their experiences, they don't just want to hear about your life. Listeners want to feel included. They want to feel valued. The stories, the insights, the discussions that are in your podcast, they want to know how it relates to them. They do not care about you nearly as much as you care about yourself. Your podcast, even if you call it the blank blank show, your name show, it's not about you. It's about them. Yeah, you're driving it. Yeah, you're the guy, the talent. But if you want listeners, you got to make it about them. So bring people in. More thoughts on this, I've got them. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 218. Let's talk about Big Podcast Amp. I'm going to do this quickly. Don't get into that excessive self-promotion. If you like the newsletter, you like the podcast, you're going to love Big Podcast Amp. It stands for Audio Monetization Program. It's a personal coaching program. It's going to help you do three things. 1, grow your podcast audience. 2, get people talking about your podcast. 3, make more money with your podcast and also your podcasting skills. I mentioned the Riverside ad. AI, this is the big thing. And the next thing for AI isn't just written content. It is AI reading spoken emotions. You know who AI companies are hiring right now? People who know how to record voices. Maybe you're a host and you can be happy or you can be sad. If you're that person, there are opportunities for you. I'm going to help you take the skills that you got, make money with them. If you want more information, bigpodcast.com/amp. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. How to grow your podcast without social media. You sick of playing the social media game? I hear you. This is how you don't have to. Let other people play the social media game. Let them share your content. That's the first thing you need to do. You need to start with great content that's worth sharing. Great content is the backbone of any successful podcast. What is great content? It's what I just talked about a minute ago. Content that your listeners can hear themselves in, relate to, attach their lives to, their relationships. They're going to go to their friends. Hey, you know what I just learned? This. Here's how it relates to me. I think it will relate to you as well. That's how podcasts grow. If you're hanging out on social media all day, 24/7, that's not good enough, man. That's only going to get you so far. You can only reach so many people yourself. You need an army of people, even 10, 20 people. That's so much better than just you. And you're going to start that with great content. Strategic partnerships, partnering with people. And let's look at this in a different way. Let's go back to those 10 or 20 listeners. If you can make it easy for those 10 or 20 listeners or more, maybe you've got hundreds or thousands of them, to share your content, let them know what needs to be shared. Again, make it easy. Have the clips ready. Have the text ready. Simply encourage them to share it. Make it easy. Give them a little nudge. That's going to get you a lot better results than just waiting on them to figure that out. People don't know that you are waiting for them to do something. Your audience are not mind readers. They don't know that you want them to buy something. They don't know that they need to subscribe. They don't know that you've got a newsletter. They don't know that you've got live events. They're not mind readers. They're not paying that much attention to you. That's why you got to say the same thing a few times. And to take it back to what I said earlier, yeah, it's a fine line. You don't be promoting. I see some dudes on a book launch. Whew, man, 6 months, every single thing out of their mouths. Buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. Here's a photo of the book. Buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. Ugh. It gets old. At the same time, if you don't do anything, you're not going to sell anything. So work that fine line, figure it out. Most people, and I want to give you carte blanche to go out and get crazy, most people undersell rather than oversell. They're too shy. They're too meek. Don't meek out. This is where all this fits together. If you're getting listener feedback saying, hey, you're promoting too much, listen, not just to one person, because again, that 360 thing I talked about, go here, do this, stop this, start this. Don't let one comment change everything that you're doing. But if you are getting a lot of those comments and there's a pattern there, listen up. These people are telling you what they want. Give it to them. Now that's for maximum growth. I'll do what I want to do. All right, good. But don't expect a big audience, at least not those guys. Maybe your audience just hasn't found you. This comes down to a couple things. 1, give people what they want. And 2, give them something so good that it's going to enter the conversations that they have when they are not listening to your podcast. Oh, man, listen, I was just listening to a podcast about dogs. Yeah, you got to check it out. What do they got going on in their life? Extreme couponing, big gains in the gym. You enter their life. Think about that. What they are doing when they are not listening to podcasts, that's what you want to get in on. How can you do that? One more thing for you, paid growth strategies that can accelerate your podcast growth, give you options to reach specific audiences, very specific audiences. It is scary the amount of data that these big companies have on people. We used to buy mailing lists, and it would be like, I think this is a guy, owns his own house. He just bought this one thing, and they would sell that buyer list to you. You say, okay, well, he bought this one thing, and I've got something similar. Maybe I should mail him. He's in a zip code where he probably owns his own house. We know he's a dude based on his name. That was the kind of data we had, like 2 or 3 things. These days, nope. They're following you around. That's how these social media companies make money. You can use that to grow your podcast. It's going to cost you, but it may actually make you money because you've got those people coming in. Arbitrage. You can buy a listener for $1, but if you know a listener is worth $2, $3, $5, then you're making money. You can press that pedal down, hit the gas. I'd spend $1 all day if I knew I could make $5. That's a nice return on investment. I've got more thoughts on this. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 218. 550 episode ideas. The last issue of the newsletter and the last audio edition of the newsletter, I talked about a 100 episode idea list. I have that linked. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 218. I've got another list for you. 550 more podcast episode ideas. I want you to play around with these. They're really journal prompts. But if you're doing a Sausage Factory podcast, and a Sausage Factory podcast is something where you roll the tape and you speak in a linear way, you want a beginning, a middle, and an end. There are no notes. Maybe you're reading something. That's part of it. Reading a script. The other thing you're doing, thinking on your feet, and also you are improvising. But this is to get you in the habit of, if you need to go on the air, if you need to speak, let's say a funeral, a wedding, bless the food at Thanksgiving. Bobby, would you say grace? Yeah, you're ready for it, man. You're not nervous at all. You want to get up there and give some nice words about Granny? You're ready. Maybe you end up in court. Maybe you see an attractive member of the opposite sex, or for 10% of people, the same sex. Don't miss that opportunity, man. Shoot your shot. This is going to help you. I call it the Sausage Factory. I've got a link on how you can do that. And I've got these 500 episode ideas for you. You're never going to run out of things to talk about. This is the best thing that you can do to be a better podcast host. All the links, more information, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 218. Banning Twitter links. That's a question. Banning Twitter links? Perfect for that AI. Lots of people spent years growing a following and community on Twitter. I was one of those people. I use the word was because I am done with Twitter. That platform, no longer useful for me. Will it be useful in the future? I don't know. But right now, there's so many ads. More importantly, so many of the people that I wanted to connect with, they are gone. It is a gentrified neighborhood. The old guys in the neighborhood, they're out. And the old neighborhood is now a new neighborhood. The new neighborhood full of AI-generated junk and Temu ads. I get why people go on about the glory days. I feel that some people with big followings, and you see this happen on any kind of social media, by the way. Remember Clubhouse? Man, that was huge during the lockdown. So you have people who had these huge audiences, and they finally did it. They were the top guys on a social media platform. No, man, come on back to Clubhouse. No, it's still going. We're still going. No, it's not. MySpace, no. Now, don't get me wrong. MySpace gets a ton of traffic. Friendster, ton of traffic. All these things still get a ton of traffic, but not compared to some of the bigger social media platforms right now where everybody from Twitter is going. Blue Sky, something I've done for podcasters to connect with each other because it's difficult when everybody leaves your neighborhood, everybody's split up. Where did everybody go? Where did Billy go? Where did Bobby go? Well, they're going to be on this list. It's a list of podcasters. I want to get you on it. It's a great way to connect with other podcasters, talk about what's happening in the podcasting industry. I have it linked. You'll find that link at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 218. Free Podcasting Masterclass. I've got another no-cost podcast training for you. No cost meaning it is free. Here's what you're going to learn. The first thing is how to attract podcast listeners. You're going to develop strategies to create compelling content that draws listeners in, keeps them coming back for more. What does your audience want? We're going to talk about that. How to identify and cater to your target audience's preferences. You're going to learn about how to build instant rapport with guests. This is really important. And this is a skill, by the way. It's not going to just help you with your podcast. It's going to help you on a job interview. That whole attractive member of the opposite sex thing I mentioned a minute ago, it's going to help you there. Instant rapport. Oh man, that guy's so nice. She is great, isn't she? Yeah, that could be you. And you're going to learn these skills from this podcast training that I've got for free. Also, how to handle difficult podcasting situations. I got a story that I tell on there. You know Megadeth? I was doing something with Dave Jr. from Megadeth. Had an interesting situation. It was live at an event. There was an audience, I don't know, 50, 60 people, but big enough that the show needed to go on. Also, we were recording for radio. You want that story? It's in the free masterclass that I've got for you. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue 218. That is how to get it. Almost there. This was the January edition of the newsletter, January 31st. Long month, right? It is a joke about that, but there's a podcasting element to this. And this has to do with Joe Rogan. Even if you're a Joe bro, if you love Joe Rogan's podcast, there have likely been times where you're 3 hours in and you're like, oh boy, when's he going to wrap it up? And yeah, you can turn it off, but some people like to complete things. You just can't stand it. Like a bad TV series. I don't know, man. I'm already this far invested. Got to throw this good money after bad. Better finish out the other 47 episodes just to see if something does happen. People do that with podcasts too. And this is a lesson for you in that if you can say the same thing in a shorter amount of time, and I think Joe Rogan could. I don't think I've ever sat through an entire Joe Rogan episode. I'm more of a clips guy. And even that, I would not call myself a Rogan fan. He's interesting because he's the guy. And I think he's worth watching because he's the guy. But most of the time, it's what I don't want to do. And one of these things is a 4-hour podcast, a 3-hour podcast. No. Most people cannot handle that, man. And I know you can put different ads in there. That's another thing that he's doing, by the way. The ad-free guys that are paying for Spotify, they're putting ads in Joe Rogan's podcast. Not the baked-in ads. They're just cramming ads in there. Got to get that $250 million back, I guess. Here's the bottom line. If you can say something in 5 minutes, what the other guy is taking 10 minutes to say, you're twice as good. I want you to think about that. Edit. Keep your episodes tight. More thoughts on this, newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 218. Hey, thanks for joining me. I love having you here. I'd love to work with you. Bigpodcast.com/AMP. That's how to do it. It's audio monetization program. Bigpodcast.com/AMP. If you have not subscribed to this podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe. I'm here every week, sometimes a couple times a week. Every single episode about growing your podcast, getting more people to your podcast, making a podcast that people care about, making a podcast that makes you money. This is how to do it. Go to bigpodcast.com. There's a button for you to subscribe. 3 buttons, actually. One for iPhone, one for Android. One is an RSS feed. While you were there, you can click on one. Boom, you are subscribed. You'll never miss an episode. You're going to get the Manny Fresh episode. You're going to get the Jesse Johnson episode. You're going to get all these episodes. Each one of them for free. Each one of them about growing your podcast. Bigpodcast.com, that's the website. Go there right now before you forget. Subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.